Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. And Tom, it's almost feeling like, as always, from the mobile studio of your car following another practice session and interviews. What did you think of practice today, Tom?
Well, we didn't actually get to watch practice, but I assume it went really well. So we didn't see anyone hobbling out or anything, so that was good.
Would you say guys are flying around, playing fast?
That has certainly been everything that we've been told, is that they're flying around to the ball, playing fast, trying to keep things simple.
Right.
Freshmen are drinking through a fire hose,
right.
But that's to be expected this time of year.
Now, is this early in camp or is this late in camp right now?
See, this is the midpoint of camp.
Oh.
This week is exactly the midpoint of camp. I don't remember if it's Wednesday's practice or Monday's practice, but one of them is the 8th practice of the spring out of 15. So we are smack dab in the middle of camp, and it seems like we're starting to maybe get a few more answers than we had a couple weeks ago.
Well, and that's interesting because we are getting more answers from coaches who you talked to them 2 weeks ago or whenever things started, and really they give you the answers I just gave you. It's early. We'll see. We hope. Now you're starting to see players emerge, and even though we talked to the defensive backs today and the receivers and those assorted assistants, and even though they don't want to go too much into like who's standing out or what players are, they are able to give you more because they have more information.
Right, and they're not going to give you everything, but they're also not like intentionally hiding stuff necessarily. They're not trying to tell you absolutely nothing, but you have to interpret a little bit with the answers that you're given.
Yeah.
But you're getting now more information to interpret, which I think is helpful. And you can sort of figure out when you see guys starting to work with different positions and how they're utilizing different people in different spots. That, I think, even if they don't tell you, that tells you something.
Although I will say I'm probably still very confused about the defense. We can get to that in a little bit. First, we'll start with the news of the day, even though it's the week since we've last talked. Justin Hilliard, Achilles injury. Cameron Babb, a knee injury. OSU announced that they were both out indefinitely. Blue Smith has left the program, Ryan Day said. I thought it was interesting the way Ryan Day put it on Saturday, where he said he's voluntarily left. He'll be on scholarship until the end of the semester, and they will basically provide whatever support he needs, which is an odd way of... it's not odd for whatever situation this is, but it's one of those things where usually if somebody is looking to transfer, they say goodbye or whatever, and it doesn't feel like that's what this is, and nobody wanted to really go into more detail on that. We talked to Brian Hartline today, and Blue Smith wasn't even brought up. But the more, I think, pertinent losses would be Hilliard and Cameron Babb. Cameron Babb was, as you guys, I'm sure you know, had a ACL tear that cost him his senior season of high school. Then he did it again, last June?
Yes.
To cost him his freshman season at Ohio State. Now there's another. Ohio State won't disclose exactly what the injury is, but they've got a lot of receivers, but obviously they wanted Cameron Babb out there because they've seen a little bit of what he can do. And Tom, they're only getting to see a little bit and already liking that. And so when they project that to a healthy player, obviously that would be a huge help to them. But now he is out for a while, and Hartline said today that Cameron Babb is a guy who can persevere through this. He's done it before. But man, 3 times.
Yeah, that's it. Both Hilliard and Babb you heard the news and you just kind of went, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Both of them have been, by all accounts, done everything they've been asked to do at Ohio State. Both came in with the recruiting profile and pedigree that suggested, yep, this could be a real impact player at Ohio State. And both of them have just not gotten a chance to show it since they've been here, which is, it seems particularly unfair. I mean, they're both particularly unfair in their own ways. Babb, this is going to be 3.5 years. If he sits out this fall, 3.5 years he will have missed out of the last 4. He will have played 6 games since the start of his junior year of high school. That's really... He's someone who they were not expecting to be a starter this fall, but if he had been healthy, could get back on the field, start building up that confidence again, start contributing in some way, and then potentially leap into a starting job in 2020. Now that timeline gets pushed back again, so maybe if he's missing this year, maybe next year is the kind of consolidation year, and then 2021 is. But it just keeps happening, and I can't imagine how difficult that must be to be so talented. He was ranked as a top 100 prospect even without playing his senior year and without playing half of his junior year. That is how gifted he is. And he has not gotten a chance to show it. And Justin Hilliard's the same way. Justin Hilliard was a 5-star recruit, ranked by some services. And Babb, it has been pretty consistently leg issues. Hilliard, it's just been all sorts of different stuff. This was an Achilles. He had a bicep tear at one point or something like that.
Then the other bicep.
Then the other bicep. It's just been like one thing after another for him. And he's another guy where he came in just so talented, and it was just like, I can't wait to see this guy in the field. Can't wait to see what he does. He's by all accounts a really good kid, a nice guy, does what he's supposed to do, works hard, and it just can't seem to catch a break.
Hilliard is, like you said, a 5-star guy, comes in with all of these accolades, and is a special teamer for the most part. Last year, he's a leader of the special teams, and he embraced that role. He welcomed it, and sure, he would have liked to have been playing more defense, but he wasn't a guy who was pouting about it. He was a leader. He was one of the guys they were relying on this year to be a leader. And seeing him leave the field Saturday, he had to be carted off, and the cart drove right past me, and you could just see it wasn't just an ankle tweak or whatever by the look on his face, and he knew it was something serious. And so yeah, you hate to see that. Like, of all the guys, you don't want to see anybody obviously being carted off, but he's probably the last guy you want to see going through another thing. And then with Babb, if you want to go check out his high school highlights at Huddle or YouTube, and just imagine him in this offense, because he's got all kinds of abilities. And so he'll be missed. I don't know, like you said, I don't know what his role would have been this year. I would project him as a Z, and they've got Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, now Austin Mack is there. But that's a deep group of receivers any way you look at it, and you still find ways to get those young guys in. But so it's a loss, and like you said, it costs him an opportunity to be better prepared for next year. But we've Adam Stewart, who's the head physical therapist, physical guy who got Johnny Dixon back, got JT Barrett, whether you like it or not, he got him ready for the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, and has been involved in all of these. And like the Johnny Dixon thing, that's a long-term, 3-year commitment, 4-year commitment with him, and they'll get Cameron Babb right. If then you got to wonder, at what point do they not? Does a player just feel like, what, it is what it is, I'm done? And Johnny Dixon was right there and almost quit after the 2016 season, but decided to come back. It sucks, and those are the two most serious injuries at this point. There's a lot of guys dinged up right now where there's no need to push them into spring. We know Jordan Fuller and Brandon Bowen are out. Robert Landers, what he had 3 things Ryan Day said on Saturday. He was describing a 50-year-old man, he has trouble going up the stairs. His sciatica is acting up.
When it rains, his knee gets all...
He's got black lung, just all kinds of stuff. Demario McCall was a calf. Still hasn't really... He's just started practicing a little bit on Saturday. And you wrote about it, but they have such big plans for him, it feels like. And, they haven't been able to get him out there. Baron Browning came back from spring break with a hamstring, and which of us, who among us, have not returned from spring break a little worse for wear and not quite what we were when we left. Tuff Borland, it was surprising to see him with a knee brace on Saturday, but he took a helmet to the knee, and that was precautionary. That's about
that's the ones I can think of, but we keep getting questions about, okay, so who's looking like they might be the starting linebackers, and it's like, well, Saturday we were watching and Taraja Mitchell's running with the ones, and it was like, whoa, Taraja Mitchell, look at that. And then it turned out, well, the other two guys who were Mike's were both out. So yes, he was the number one because they only had one. So he may still end up earning that spot, but they are so cautious with injuries this time of year that tons of guys are getting held out. So you can look at who's running with the ones, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah, at one point it was Alex Williams and Zach Harrison and Noah Potter running with the ones at defensive end, and they're just rolling through all different kinds of guys everywhere. But I think a lot of these nicks and dings, they would be playing on Saturday.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah. I wouldn't get too worried about that. But as we've said before, the Thayer Munford thing being a back issue is certainly a concern. And there's really no news there, and there won't be probably until this summer, I would assume, in terms of what the prognosis is or if they'll even give us anything at that point. I know we'll all be looking the first day of fall camp to see who's out there, if he's out there or not. I mentioned Austin Mack moving to Z. That's an interesting situation because it's obviously he was the X last year with Benjamin Victor, and Ryan Day and Brian Hartline have both said it's about getting the three best receivers on the field together, and that sounds like it's Austin Mack, Benjamin Victor, and of course KJ Hill. Mack is a guy who is more equipped to play those positions. This is his senior year. I was surprised by it, but Tom, it makes sense when you consider the other Z's at this point are Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, and that's a lot to ask of a freshman Garrett Wilson to be in that too deep right away and pick up everything when it's still a work in progress for everybody.
Yeah, moving Austin Mack to Z at least part-time this spring tells you probably a little bit about they just want to be a little cautious with Garrett Wilson and not try and put too much on his plate right away. It would not surprise me at all if Garrett Wilson was in that top 6 kind of rotation by the end of the year, but they probably don't want to just assume that he's going to be ready for that first week. And there's no real reason. Austin Mack knows the X position at this point. Like he's not going to get that much out of continuing to work at X. So give him a chance to slide in over at Z. You have a little more flexibility in terms of personnel. It gives Jalen Harris more reps at X because all of a sudden, instead of being the third guy, he's the second guy. And if they're more, they're probably a little more comfortable with Jalen Harris at this point than they are with Garrett Wilson, is basically the takeaway there. And that's good news for Jalen Harris because Jalen Harris has been kind of fighting and scrapping to get on the field, and this is a big spring for him, and it sounds like he's making the most of that. And from what we've seen of Garrett Wilson and what we've heard about Garrett Wilson, it sure doesn't seem like there's any concern that he can play at this level. So if they're sliding Mack over there just as kind of a precautionary start of the season kind of thing, yeah, sure, that's fine. And give Jalen Harris a chance to play a little more. And, there are a couple different advantages there, but like I said, I would not be at all surprised if Garrett Wilson was in that top 6 rotation by middle of the season.
Yeah, because we got to watch the entire Saturday practice, and Garrett Wilson was impressive. And I was thinking about, what we're going to talk about today, and I'm like, well, we already talked about Garrett Wilson looking good on Saturday. I'm like, well, no, we couldn't have because we haven't had a show, but we've talked, among each other about it, and he doesn't look like a freshman in any way. And he doesn't really look like a normal receiver in most ways. He stands out when he's running downfield, when he's catching a screen and making a guy miss. Like if he was playing at Purdue, you'd have like Rondale Moore getting 120 catches and Garrett Wilson getting like 98 or something like that, because he's one of those guys. Just give him the ball, get him involved, and he'll get whatever he gets this year. I don't over under 26 and a half catches, something like that.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty realistic number. 26 catches for 400 something yards.
Because if they wanted to, they could give him the ball 80 times.
Right.
And I'm sure he would do just fine, but there are other guys on the field and there's other talent there. But
he's someone who on Saturday, I think I said this to you and you kind of laughed and said you thought the same thing. It is very difficult for guys to pop during individual drills. Like when it's like, okay, they're going against a defensive back and a guy makes a great catch, like, oh wow, that's great. You go through individual drills, and unless a guy drops a pass or something, it's very hard to notice, like, oh, wow, that's something notable. They were running just curls, just like 10-yard curls. Come back, catch the ball, turn upfield, go. He is so much faster, just that burst, catch, spin, go. The burst there is not like anyone else, and I literally cannot remember anything else that I've watched this spring during an individual drill that I was like, oh, that's notable.
Yeah.
I saw that. You saw that. Someone else, one of the, Patrick, one of our friends on the beat, I said something to him and he goes, oh yeah, like it is noticeable how quick and explosive he is. And between now and September, you will get sick of us talking about Garrett Wilson. And he will probably, in the first few games, not do a whole lot because it's hard for a true freshman to get in the rotation at the start of the year. And everyone will get, then he'll be the overhyped guy. Yep. And then all of a sudden, it'll be like Chris Olave last year, where people were giving us crap for writing about Chris Olave in the middle of the season. Like, why are you writing a fluff piece on this guy? And all of a sudden, because he had 2 touchdowns in the first quarter against Michigan 3 weeks later. Like, you are going to have to trust us on this for a little while, but Garrett Wilson is going to do some special stuff at Ohio State.
And people still give me crap or other media people crap about like Dontre Wilson, the hype around him. And he still had an outstanding season as a freshman. So I think when people cite like the whole Dontre Wilson overhype thing, it's like, well, he was pretty good, and there was plenty of hype around J.K. Dobbins. He turned out pretty good. And this guy, it's whenever you get to see he may not be catching a pass or anything during the spring game, but watch him when you can, because he's different. He's smoother, he's faster, he's quicker. It's fun to watch, even just taking a little hitch and turning it upfield. His movements, there's nothing wasted, and it sounds, we're fawning or whatever we are, but go ahead and put him on the hype train, sitting in the seat, the engineer's seat. But that's, we're just telling you what we see, and you can't not see it when you watch him just a little bit.
Yeah, he has popped this spring. The other guy, if he's driving the hype train, then Jaelen Gill is riding shotgun there. He's the other guy who you watch when they're just doing one-on-ones, and he just, every time you look up, he's making a play 15, 20 yards down the field. Yep. He's not, and they'll throw him a little bubble screen or something, and he'll make a guy miss. Just make a guy miss in a phone booth, and then he can get downfield and catch the ball. He's someone else who you don't know quite what to expect numbers-wise from him this fall, because you've got KJ Hill at that age, you've got CJ Saunders at that age spot. So how many chances is he really going to get on offense? Probably not enough to have a 1,000-yard kind of season, but he's another person to just watch for. Watch that number 5 on offense, watch that number 26 on offense, and at some point they're going to do something that you're going to go, oh, those guys did know what they were talking about. So don't yell at us too much before that happens. Just know that it will happen at some point.
And I like those two together. Even though they're not in the same class, it feels like the offense will eventually be coming theirs. And it reminds me of Michael Wiley and David Boston in 1996. Very different positions and everything, but things were being handed over to them, and well, actually they were taking them.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, you know. David Boston went out and took Buster Tillman's job, but Jaelen Gill, on Saturday there were several high school football teams on the sidelines watching, and you know, he made a guy miss, and the entire sideline of high school players were going crazy. He doesn't fight the ball at all. He looks very natural. Obviously, so does Garrett Wilson, and they're fun to watch. And I look forward to watching them on Saturdays. But again, we don't know exactly how much they will play. And Jaelen Gill is the 2B to C.J. Saunders at the age maybe, but I think he's shiftier than Paris. Doesn't have Paris's speed, but he's still plenty fast because he was getting around the corner just fine on those jet sweeps. I think he's different than anybody else they have at H, so I think he's going to be out there a lot.
I would expect him to get a chance, and we've seen him out there with the punt returners at times too, so they may be trying to get him on the field on special teams somewhere. This is the wonderful Ohio State problem to have, which is you have way too many talented skill guys to be able to use them all as much as you would want to use them. But when they are looking to find a way to get a guy on the field, that tells you something about how they view them. I talked to KJ Hill a little bit on Wednesday about Gill, and what he said was, you got to remember, he played high school, he played running back in high school. He was not a wide receiver. So last year, he was really just learning how to be a wide receiver. This year now, he's kind of got the basics down. He is a wide receiver now. He's no longer a running back trying to play wide receiver. He is a wide receiver now. So now it's kind of time to take that next step. And, you know, it certainly seemed like he was impressed with what he had seen out of Gill this spring.
And they're both just natural athletes. Gill is also a very good baseball player. Garrett Wilson, a very good basketball player. And, you know, those natural guys who just, whatever they do, they're good at. And things don't seem that hard for them, but they are also some of the hardest working guys. And the production shows. Jalen Harris, we mentioned him earlier. I asked Brian Hartline today if the move to Z for Austin Mack was made easier because of the development of Jalen Harris, and he said it was. And it went back to what I talked to him about at the Rose Bowl. You know, how do you keep Jalen Harris motivated? He's got Benjamin Victor and Austin Mack ahead of him, and playing time just isn't there. And he said, you know, I don't know how you could be a wide receiver in that position and not be motivated to get on the field and do everything possible. And you know, he took that to heart this offseason and was good enough to get Austin Mack kicked out of the X entirely because they want to get Jalen Harris out there. But he flashed some on Saturday, and it reminded me of like last year when we came out talking about, you know, Jalen Harris looked pretty good, and then once you have, you know, like two catches all year,
yep.
And it's just really difficult because of the depth chart. And so when we talk about these guys, you know, we're not talking 70 catches, 90 catches. We're just saying when it is their opportunity, and it will eventually come, those guys are going to be pretty good. Anything else from the receivers today?
That was, I think, the big stuff from the receivers. KJ Hill, I think was you know, KJ Hill is KJ Hill, and you know, kind of taking over that leadership role in that room after Johnny and Paris and Terry left. But you know, it's I think he's going in, and he knows he's got a chance to have one more good, one more very solid season. Someone asked him about, you know, does he have goals? Does he have, you know, records in mind? And he said, you know, the only one he knew of was there's a catch streak record that he is potentially could set. And he said he only knew that because Jerry Emig, the SID, had told him about it. So, I mean, it sounds like the SIDs are really taking the focus away from the team and really putting on individual goals, which you got to question how, you know, if Ryan Day is going to be okay with that.
You know, what the SID should also tell KJ is that he's like 50 receptions away from being the school's all-time leader.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're totally on that. You said KJ is KJ, and I asked Brian Hartline, like, do we talk about KJ enough? He's like, no. And so we're like, go ahead, talk about him. And like you said, he's the leader of that room, and just he said you won't be. He's not the burner that Paris is, but he does things that Paris couldn't do and that other guys can't do. And we see that all the time, those mesh routes when he's just dragging 3 yards beyond the line of scrimmage and then picks up 17, 20 yards because a linebacker or safety can't stay with him, and he's just able to find those lanes and those zones, and he has the best hands on the team according to Hartline, which I don't think anybody would disagree with.
I don't think anyone who has watched this team the last couple of years would argue with that at all.
So I'm interested to see what he does in the NFL. He feels like he could just be one of those prototype slot guys that stays in the league forever, but you never know. But Hartline did say he was very happy that KJ Hill returned, and as a wide receivers coach, that's the kind of guy you want in your room, and you want on the field because you can trust him with everything.
Right, he's the guy that they're looking for on third down.
Yeah.
You have C.J. Saunders and K.J. Hill, who are both kind of that possession H type receiver. They don't. Neither of them is the Paris Campbell type of H, which is the home run hitter. Because you can think of some long touchdowns that K.J. Hill has had. He had that one-handed catch against Nebraska last year. One of those games in the middle of the season, Nebraska or Indiana, where he had that one-handed catch and run, and he'll score a couple long ones, but he's not the, he touches the ball and you immediately think, oh, he could go 70 yards this time. That's Jaelen Gill, is that kind of explosive H this year. But they have other, if you have the Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson or even a Benjamin Victor who can be that home run hitter downfield, then that's, you are perfectly happy having a guy who can get you 12 yards on 3rd and 8 every time, and if the ball's anywhere close, he's going to catch it, he's going to bring it in, he's going to get you that first down.
Yeah, this KJ Hill as possession receiver is ironic considering that his first ever reception in 2016 was like a 47-yard touchdown down the field against Bowling Green.
Yeah, but everyone scored a 50-yard touchdown against Bowling Green that day.
That was half. They had 2 40-yard receptions that day. That was half of their season total. Mm-hmm. And that was after 2015 when they had all kinds of 40-yard plays and in the passing game, 2014 as well, and then they put up 4 that year, and 2 of them were in that game. We also spoke with the defensive backs today with Jeff Okudah, Jordan Fuller, Brendan White. Maybe we'll get to talk to him again with the linebackers, who knows.
Sean Wade, too.
Sean Wade and Matt Barnes and Jeff Hafley. Tom, let's talk about the safeties and how they're the free safety, the strong safety, because I asked Jeff Hafley to explain it, and he's like, well, we're going to run everybody through there because we want everybody to be able to play it, including bullet, even though there's only certain body types that can really handle the bullet because of what it all entails. And the bullet would be the hybrid linebacker safety, the Brendan White, Jocelyn Went. But I was hoping to get hey, who's a free safety? Who's your strong safety? And what I got from Hafley is they're all everywhere, and we're trying to find out what we have. You said you got more from Barnes?
Yeah, Barnes. I asked Barnes, is this like a half of the field? Like one's going to play on the field side, one's going to play on the boundary side, and he's like, no, not. It didn't sound like there's that kind of a real clear delineation, at least yet. They may change it a little bit. He talked a little bit more about just the type of players they're looking for. With that free spot, you're looking for kind of that Malik Hooker, play center field, rangy, get cover, kind of sideline to sideline kind of guy. And on the strong safety spot, and now I'm forgetting the term he used. He used it. Didn't call it the strong safety. He used a different term for it. But he talked about.
It wasn't Falcon, was it?
It was not Falcon. Okay. No, they've changed the names of these positions all so much that I'm not remembering what it is now. But that's more of that run support kind of position. So they have not. It does not sound like they have guys completely locked in that this guy is definitely going to be this type of guy. Last year that was really Jordan Fuller was kind of that free safety spot. Brendan White was that strong safety spot. Now they've moved White down to bullet. So.
And in that old way, the strong safety was the deep safety under Greg Schiano, and the free safety was the guy who would be up towards the line of scrimmage as that slot corner. Now it's the other way around in terms of the strong safety being towards the line of scrimmage like they do in the NFL and like everybody else has always done in terms of the terminology. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is all like subject to change. It would not. Everything like the goal when we talk to these guys is like figure out like exactly like how do they plan on switching this, and are you recruiting for different traits necessarily? For when you're recruiting a safety, you think I'm recruiting this guy to be a free safety, or and they said no, not really. Like we're going to see them in, get them in, see how they develop, see how their strengths and weaknesses play out, and where they fit best, and do what's best for the team, and all the stuff that they're going to say, but you hope they're not going to say. But I think we maybe have a little bit of a better sense, but it would be interesting to ask again in the fall when we get, if we get these guys in August. At that point, you would think they're probably going to have a better sense for these are our 3 guys who are going to be fit best on this spot and versus this spot. And you can remember Jordan Fuller is going to be a starter this fall. He's not practicing at all this spring. He is sitting out the whole spring. So that's where we're seeing guys play now is not, the fact that these 2 guys are the ones right now does not mean that these 2 guys are going to be the ones in the fall.
Yeah, and talking with Brendan White, he said like the base defense is him at bullet and 1 high safety and then the other safety up towards the line of scrimmage. And I'm wondering which of those safeties does Jordan Fuller is he best suited for? Because for me, I would put Shaun Wade. Like Shaun Wade does the slot corner. That's what he does now, and that's what he did last year. But he's also such a ball hawk and has such good range. Would he be better suited for the deep safety? And is Jordan Fuller better suited for the more physical stuff because he's one of the best tacklers on the team? Tom, it feels like we don't know.
Well, remember going back earlier in the show, we talked about sometimes you sort of have to interpret things and based on what they say because they don't actually tell you, but you can sort of piece together what they're saying. Shaun Wade said his goal for the season for the unit was 15 interceptions. Jeff Okudah said what Wade may have been talking about was Jeff Hafley told Wade that he thought Wade could have 15 interceptions in this system. So does that mean that Wade is potentially that back, that deep safety, that center field safety, Malik Hooker type role? Maybe that's, and again, like we're talking to these guys sequentially. So by the time Jeff Okudah said that, Jeff Hafley was gone. So we didn't get a chance to go back and ask Jeff Hafley about that. So again, we're kind of piecing things together here, but maybe that's an indication that they really are looking at Wade at that deep safety spot.
And Hafley was asked about Josh Proctor, and he's flashing as well. And if you're talking, and we don't know, we know Jordan Fuller is with the ones, even though he's not there right now. You've got Shaun Wade, Isaiah Pryor, who Hafley said has done really well, or actually Brendan White said that. So you've got Wade, Pryor, and Proctor, but and those guys are all vying to be that second safety on like passing downs, nickel downs. Then Brendan White moves, and I think they go to a 2 deep, and they bring in another safety, and there's more confusion, at least not on their part, but it was there's so many moving parts and moving pieces, and I think you have to when you've got so many linebackers and just 2.5 spots for them, because that third linebacker, sometimes it's a Sam and it'll be a linebacker, other times it's Brendan White and it'll be that bullet, and other times there won't be one there because they're in the nickel, or as White kind of said, it's more of a dime at that point because he's already considered like the base defense is essentially a nickel. So when you go to the nickel, you're going to the dime. There's a lot of change. It's just a big old ashtray. That's what you just call the defense the car ashtray.
This is the amazing thing is that if you go back 2 weeks, this is so much more clarity than we had 2 weeks ago. We're still not there. Again, this is still the middle of spring ball. We'll probably know a little bit more once we see the spring game, although guys will be probably divided up between teams. So you're not really going to have a great sense even then, but this is more clarity than we had a couple weeks ago, because and I think that's partly we're getting to talk to more people, and partly they're kind of figuring this stuff out this spring on the fly. Shaun Wade has been playing all over the place. He's been with the safeties. He's been with the nickels. He's been out at corner a little bit. Like he is. Someone called him a Swiss Army knife today. That's kind of what he is. It's like, where do they need him? He was asked, where do you want to play? And he goes, wherever the coaches want me to play. Yeah. Which, yes, that is the correct answer. Not the most
Swiss
illuminating.
soldier.
Yeah, not the most illuminating answer, but the correct answer. So there are a lot of unanswered questions still, but you sort of can start seeing where some of the people are fitting in, and where, based on who they're moving to Bullitt, what they're looking for at Bullitt. That it's Brendan White and Jocelyn Wint. It's kind of the guys who are the bigger safeties. Like, that makes sense. Like, that's kind of that hybrid safety linebacker spot. Like, that makes sense. So a little more clarity, but we're not there yet.
Although, when we first started talking about this possibility of a hybrid defense, I don't know, 2 months ago, whenever it was, we talked about Brendan White being that guy. So pat ourselves on the back.
I mean,
we shouldn't pat each other on the back, especially not here in the car, sitting in some random parking lot. But that was, I guess, the most obvious thing. But in talking to him today, he says it's hard, to go from, because on Saturday he'd be at Bullitt, then he'd move back to safety for the dime. And he said it's not easy going from one place to the other and learning a new thing. And this is a guy who last year had established himself as a safety, as one of the top 11 guys on defense, and was coming into this offseason thinking that would be the case again. And when they told him that they wanted him to do that, I asked him, did that give you any trepidation? Did it kind of bum you out because you had established yourself? And he said, no, it was an exciting thing that they had a role for me. And he likes that. He believes this is where he'll be for the next 2 years, assuming he doesn't go pro after this year. And I asked him if he had seen, because he said, the position used to be called the Viper. He knew where it came from. And I asked him if he had looked at like the numbers that past Vipers like Jabril Peppers or Khalil Hudson put up at Michigan. And he said no, but he's watched film of those types of players in the NFL. And it's an exciting position to be in, because you're in coverage, you're rushing the quarterback, you're being sent into the backfield on blitzes. It gives you an opportunity to make plays, and I guess one way to appease somebody that you're moving from a position that they got comfortable at is to tell them you get to go do all sorts of fun things.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, Hafley saying he has a chance to get 15 interceptions this year, that tells you that they view Wade as someone they can put in that.
I'm talking White.
I'm sorry, White.
Yeah,
Wade. Sorry, yeah. That this is an opportunity to be in a different. I mean, it's a different spot. Like you said, he'd established himself, but to be in a place where you can be a playmaker. This is potentially something that puts you in a better spot for the NFL down the line, which is, I mean, I'm sure that's his goal. His dad played in the NFL. I'm sure that's what he wants to do. So,
and it's a position that's becoming more in vogue in the NFL as well, with all of the passing going on. You've got a guy who can be versatile like that, and you look at the numbers, and don't go look at Michigan's numbers last year, because Khalil Hudson fell off of a cliff from where he was before, but you're talking like 14, 15 tackles for loss, from Peppers, from Hudson. I don't know that they'll use him exactly like that, but it sure sounds like there's going to be more blitzing from different angles, and just a simpler but faster defense all around, as they say.
As everyone has said repeatedly.
Anything else from today, the defensive backs?
A couple other things. Well, first of all, do you want to tell the listeners about when they started practicing looking back for the football?
So Jeff Okuda was asked, how's it going this spring, looking back for the ball, and he said, they're really focused on it, they're really working hard at it. And then he said because they didn't really start focusing on it last year until after the Tulane game. And
which you may recall was in the middle of the season.
And after I picked up my recorder, and it just after the Tulane game, where that's when you start that's when you refocus it. That's when you up the efforts to look back for the ball. And we have talked on many occasions about their process for looking back for the ball. In terms of you have to be even with the receiver, because if you're chasing him and you look back, you're going to give up a touchdown. And so when it comes out like, you know what, let's really nail this looking back for the football thing down, and it's like almost October,
the week before they go to Penn State.
I mean, feels like the priorities and the scheduling was a bit off last year, and especially when you say they're already working on it harder now than they did at the mid-season point last year. It's so believable.
I don't want to, please, dear listener, if you are not sitting down right now, please sit down before I say this out loud and completely blow your mind. I think there may have been some schematic issues with the Ohio State defense last year. I know. We try not to have extremely spicy takes on this podcast, but I think there may have been some issues with the defense in 2018. One thing that you can look for that will be a little different that Sean Wade brought up is they're going to play more zone this year. And that was one of Greg Schiano's things. We are a press man team. We're a press man team. And
good old Rock. Nothing beats Rock except for Purdue. So the thing that what zone gives you is, first of all, when you're in man, you're looking at the guy you're covering. You're not looking back. You're not looking at the quarterback. If you're in zone, you're facing the quarterback a lot more. That sets you up to break on the ball faster, get more interceptions, because they did not create a lot of turnovers last year. And so if you have the opportunity to do that this year, that obviously would make a big difference in some of their numbers. But he also said that, they will probably show press man just about every play, but then your corners can bail. You can have certain guys in man and certain guys in zone. That's and just confuse without making your defense more complicated. Make your defense more complicated for the opposing team to dissect, because I think they were pretty predictable last year, and so that can only. I mean, how many times have we said that? It can literally only get better than last year. So that's another example of a spot where they're doing something a little different, and you hear guys talk about it, and it's like, why did they not do this last year again? Because they're a press man team. Well, it's like, well, these are the cards we've been dealt. The government says, we are a press man team. Would I like to do more? Yes, but our hands are tied. There's nearly nothing we could do.
Look, I'm sorry. I would really like to help you out, but the card says moops.
Right, so. Exactly. We're a moops man team. That was the DBs. So that's who we talked to. Like I said, we also got to watch plenty of stuff on Saturday. We were both, I think, impressed by Justin Fields. And he recently, Monday, had his black stripe removed. Yep. Which, and I may have tweeted this or posted it on the board or said it somewhere, but it's not just because he throws the ball well. That's not what it takes to get the black stripe removed. There's more than that. It's command of the offense. It's showing some leadership, showing toughness, which is a big thing. And so it's not unexpected that he's the first scholarship player to have his black stripe removed. He should be, given that he is a sophomore. But to have it this early in spring, I think I don't know if it's a surprise, but it's a good sign. And as Ryan Day said on Saturday, he's picking up the offense quickly. He's a fast learner. He can take it in and put it back out there. So this is a very good development for the Ohio State offense. Because, watching him, and we've said he throws the ball differently. You don't have to see who's throwing it to know that was Justin Fields. Brian Hartline today was asked, how difficult is it for receivers to be getting footballs from different quarterbacks all the time? He's like, well, like Justin Fields, you have to be aware that there could be a hot ball coming. Just because his arm is different. And Matthew Baldwin throws fine, and it wasn't anything about Baldwin. It's just Justin Fields throws a hot ball, even compared to Dwayne Haskins last year. So perhaps the highest of compliments that any man could receive, really. Just watch out for the hot ball. Tom?
I'm sorry. I'm just filtering through 14,000 possible responses to that and deciding that none of them are appropriate. And so we'll just talk about quarterbacks, I guess. I know this is an open competition, but if Justin Fields was going to win this starting quarterback job this fall, this is a lot like what spring football would look and sound like, don't you think?
I do think that. And Fields took all of the reps with the ones on Saturday, and when Ryan Day was asked about that, he said, well, he's not taking all of the reps. Matthew Baldwin still gets reps with the ones, and he still will again, which is true. But Tom, if we even take out Saturday, where would you put the percentage of what we've seen with Justin Fields at the 1 and Baldwin at 2? I'm thinking maybe 60-40, something like that, where it's been more ball or more Fields, wouldn't you say?
60-40 is exactly the number I had in my head, and that's excluding Saturday,
right,
when it was pretty much all Fields. It seems like we came into spring thinking, well, Fields is going to look probably noticeably worse than Baldwin in the spring because he doesn't know the offense yet. He's just learning things. Baldwin's been here a year. He has a big head start, and I don't think I've noticed a huge gap. There was a practice where I thought Baldwin looked better than Fields, and you were a little more of a split decision there. But Baldwin has not looked noticeably better than Fields, and you've got to figure the learning curve for Fields is going to be a lot steeper, a lot quicker. So I think you can kind of figure out where this is going to end up.
I was also surprised at how much read option they were running with Fields, and I guess I shouldn't be. It's been a year since we've seen it, and he was very effective with it. One play where the Buckeyes had 4 linebackers on the field, which is another thing, but he took the keeper to around the right side, got beat. There was nobody there basically, and got tapped by Isaiah Pryor about 30 yards downfield on the sideline. Whether or not he would have brought him down during a live action, who knows? But still, there goes your quarterback for 30 yards. And there can be people who complain about bringing the read option back, but if you're going to do it 5-7 times a game or whatever, it's going to make this offense even more dangerous and gives defense more to worry about, and it makes life easier for J.K. Dobbins.
It's another weapon on offense, and you don't need to use it a lot, but you've got it, and the defense has to respect it. And you saw last year what it looks like when the defense doesn't have to respect the quarterback run, and you saw those guys crashing down off both edges. I mean, I remember there was a play against Michigan State, I think, in the red zone where it was, it was nominally, it looked like it could have been some kind of a read, and both ends just crashed down so hard on Dobbins or Weber, whoever it was, and Haskins could have walked into the end zone, but he didn't have the football because he'd handed it off, because he basically always handed it off. They had the one time against TCU where he handed it off, or didn't hand it off, and he pretty much did walk into the end zone because that was something they just didn't do. So if you have that as a threat, that keeps those guys from crashing this year, even if you don't do it a whole lot. It's just the threat of it makes a big difference. So and I don't want to besmirch the great and holy name of J.T. Barrett, but I think Justin Fields might be a little faster than J.T. Barrett and might have a little more big play ability in that run game too. So the read option you saw 2 years ago is not necessarily the read option you're going to see this fall.
Right. the 87 or 86 yarder against Minnesota would only take 10 seconds now, as opposed to the 3 full quarters.
This is when we need the truck next to our car again.
Yeah, so that's Fields, and it is true. If he was going to win it, this is what it would look like, because this is where you would expect Baldwin to have the edge. And maybe we were just there on a day where it was Justin Fields' turn to be with the ones on Saturday. But and he wasn't outstanding throwing the ball all the time. It wasn't like he was amazing and Baldwin wasn't. It's just, we get to see so little. So everything you see, you try to add into the math. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we're seeing more of Fields, you put that 2 and 2 together. But yeah, just watching him run that read, I think it's devastating, and he's more effective in terms of after having. Although, Urban loved the way JT Barrett ran it, the toughness, but Fields is just more dynamic, and he's not Braxton. Nobody is, but somewhere in between Braxton and JT is. And probably definitely not quite to Terrell Pryor, but beyond Troy Smith, and somewhere like right in the middle of all 4 of those, he's in there, more leaning towards the dynamic side. But we'll see if he wins the job. Still, at time, it's still, even though it's 6-7 practices in, it's still early.
It's getting a little later, but it's still
compared to you got summer off season, you got fall camp.
True.
Even it's not even October yet.
It's not even October yet. Michigan game's still 200 and something days away. We're
I think 248 or something like that.
Sounds about right.
So after seeing Saturday, are you? Do you feel like you know more about the linebacker situation, or are you just more confused? Or there is no, because I think I was standing next to you and we were watching. I'm like, yeah, Malik was on the short side earlier, and so it looks like he's the will, and Pete Werner is on the wide. Oh no, now Malik Harrison's on the wide and Pete Werner is on the short, and I don't know what we were talking. They're moving everywhere, and like I said, Al Washington told us there'll be times where there's 4 linebackers on the field. And so, one of the plays, I'm like counting, and there's like 4 linebackers on the field. Tom.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's
exactly. All right, let's move on.
I mean, the perfect example is what I said earlier, where it's Taraja Mitchell's with the ones, and oh my goodness, this is a major development until we kind of realize, oh yeah, Baron Browning's not out here, and Tough Borland's not out here. The tricky part about Saturday was normally they're just riding bikes in the pit or whatever, and they didn't have those guys out there because all the students were there, and there's so many high school people there on the sidelines that they had them, some of them working outside, some of them working, I think, back in the locker room or something. So we started, hey, have you seen Baron Browning? Why isn't he out here? What's going on with Baron Browning? Hey, where's Tough Borland? I haven't seen Tough Borland. What's going on with Tough Borland? And it's just, the minor nicks and dings that you see all spring, and normally you just see them kind of on the sidelines or wearing an orange limited contact jersey, and you didn't see them on Saturday. So it was we wasted a whole bunch of time on Saturday trying to solve the mystery of where the missing guys were, and it was like, just right outside, just outside, riding bikes or whatever. So.
Dallas Gant, sophomore from Toledo, has been getting a lot of praise. Mm-hmm. I think Ryan Day said he's had like 5 or 6 or 7 knockdowns in practice. I think he said he came here at like 205. He's up to 230 now, playing on the inside. Last year he was a Sam. The insides this year are Mikes and Wills. The Sam and the Bullet are a lot like the Sam and the Star under Jim Tressel. Basically, like they switch off and on depending on down and distance. I don't know if I assume Werner is a Sam because Malik Harrison's going to be on the field at all times.
Probably.
So
yeah.
That's how I have to do that math. And Baron Browning is a Mike who, and the Mike and the Will are semi-interchangeable. Now Washington told me that they've got guys that they feel can play both, and sort of like safety, I guess, where you just see what everybody can do. Although I think they're doing more of that at safety than they are at linebacker right now, at least on the inside. Anything else from today, the defense, that we haven't touched on that we should? Because there's so much, and there's so many variables and questions without answers. And Tom, we're so close to getting answers on these linebackers. It's since, I don't know, the Rose Bowl, when we knew like Bill Davis is gone, and we're so close. And I feel like by September 14th, we'll have a pretty good idea.
Maybe.
Sure. Very good point.
It feels like we know more, but they are perpetually 2 practices away from figuring out that something is or isn't working particularly well, and therefore changing, moving someone to a different spot, or changing the responsibility of a certain position in a certain package, or how they're going to deploy certain packages. So it's all early. This feels like something that, even the stuff that we feel like we know fairly definitively right now, you'll go back and listen to this in October and go, oh, we were wrong about something that we thought we were pretty confident about. We were completely wrong because someone got hurt, or something changed schematically, or they just figured out that 3 guys that they had penciled in at Mike are all better than anyone they have at Will, or vice versa, and they're flipping, they're moving people for that reason.
You say we know more about the linebackers. It's like if you've never read a book before and you just grab 2 random books and you start reading one, you read like the first couple of pages, and then you grab the other and you read like 2 pages in the middle, and you're like, I'm more well-read than I was before. You are, but what exactly do you know? Tell me about this book. Well, it was a dark and stormy night. I kind of lost it after that. So, yes, we have more information. Well, what does it mean? What does any of it mean? I've been thinking about like a depth chart and putting a depth chart on the site, and like, what do you do for free safety and strong safety? I don't know. Just 2 safeties. Yeah. What do you do with linebackers? Let's maybe we can just wait and do something at midseason after we see another practice or something, and get some more semblance of information.
Ohio State typically does release a depth chart before some games, so once we see that, I mean, even that's sometimes a little, either that's intentionally misleading or a little vague.
Yeah.
But,
to be fair to the SIDs, that's the coaches that give them that stuff. And,
yes.
And coaches are not as good. They're not as good of people as SIDs.
That's true. And you know what? At least Ohio State doesn't make you FOIA their depth chart like Michigan does. Could be worse.
You mentioned Michigan. There was something we saw, or I didn't see. You saw it and caught it on the big screen Saturday at practice. And what exactly was that?
It was during what they call the Team Up North drill, and they were running 2 separate, an offense that lined up against defense, and running the ball. So I think it was some short yardage stuff, and while they're doing this, they're blaring the old LL Cool J, "It's Time for War" over the loudspeakers, the Michigan Week Classic, and inside the Woody Hayes, and playing highlights from previous year's Ohio State-Michigan games. And spliced into the middle of that video was a big, bold headline: Michigan favored by 6.5 points against Ohio State this fall. So,
how did that get in there?
I don't know, because here's the confusing part about that. We know that was in fact the line, but we're told over and over again that they don't pay attention to that. That's not, no. We don't need, if you need any additional motivation for this game, you're not ready to play. So, I can only assume that outside saboteurs possibly had edited that in for some reason. I can't think of any other possible explanation.
Hackers?
Because it could be hackers. Yep. Chinese possibly. I don't want to speculate, but almost certainly the Chinese. But I'm shocked, because I had always, we've always been told they don't pay attention to any of that external stuff, and And to see that up there was very jarring, because why would you need to pay attention to that? That's just a distraction.
Yeah, and really, although, if in some fantasy world where this was put up there, Ryan Day had a say in it, maybe Ohio State finally has a head coach who takes this stuff seriously, who takes the Michigan game seriously, and takes the rivalry seriously, as opposed to all the others who didn't need motivation to play in the biggest game of the year.
I mean, we certainly never heard stories about Urban Meyer hanging quotes up in his locker room before significant games, maybe when he was the coach of Florida, potentially playing Ohio State. There were never any famous stories about that. So that's you see how that game turned out for Florida. So they clearly had some motivation issues there. So yeah, I mean, again, this is a little bit like the Justin Fields thing. I don't want to say anyone is a lying liar who lies when they lie about these things, but if they were lying liars who lied about these things, this is a lot like what it would look like.
When we talk to Ryan Day next, one of us should be like, Ryan, you guys know you're like 6.5 point favorite underdogs against Michigan? Oh, what?
Really? What?
That's out already? Who?
In what sport? I didn't see the.
I don't understand how this works. What does that mean? What favored? What does underdog?
What is
a cartoon?
What is a point spread?
What's football? Who are these people in my living room? Yeah, so it was an interesting little insight there. We should probably close with basketball, since the season has now come to a close. Looking at the roster that Chris Holtmann was, I don't want to say put together, it was a roster that he was given and then added to it with a freshman class that I think has a bright future and probably had to play too many minutes this year. But even before the loss to, who did they lose to, Tom? It's been so long now.
Houston.
That's right, Houston. I wrote that, has this season already been a success regardless of what happens? Because I feel like it has. This team, for the second year in a row, made it to the second round, where this team a month ago, there was no reason to talk about the tournament, pretty much. And certainly no reason to talk about winning a game. And yet they went in as an 11 seed, be the 6th seed Iowa State. Did it, and I was on the radio and somewhere yesterday, and I'm like, Chris Holtmann has to be out of like duct tape and wire now, because he used all he had for this team. CJ Jackson was beat up, and I think it was an impressive job. It wasn't an impressive team. It wasn't always easy to watch. During the first half of the season, the effort was there, and then things just, their talent, the water level of the talent basically found it. It found its level, as they say. And this was an average to above average team that won a game in the NCAA tournament and will undoubtedly be, in my opinion, Chris Holtmann's least talented team. And to get what he got out of them, when you maximize your team, that's a successful season, even if you lose 15 games during the season.
Well, this is, you called it as less or least talented team. Looking at that team last year, they were picked to finish 10th in the Big Ten, 11th in the Big Ten, and that's a team that had Keita Bates-Diop on it, who they did not have a player as good as Keita Bates-Diop this year, not by a long shot, really. And so to have squeezed not just 2 NCAA tournament appearances, but 2 NCAA tournament wins out of the last 2 years, that is about as impressive as you could get. I mean, can put any coach you want in charge of this year's Ohio State team. Pick someone. Coach K, you want to give Coach K this roster? How far does Coach K get them in the NCAA tournament? How far does...
Well, he's got the refs.
He does have the refs. John Beilein, Tom Izzo, you want to pick a coach. Who is going to get this team appreciably further than the round of 32? And it was not like they got completely blown out of the water by Houston, which is a pretty good team. They beat a very solid team in the first round. You played a very good team in the second round. You hung in there with 3 or 4 minutes left to go. You were still plausibly in the game. They got that down. I don't think they ever got it down inside 5 in the second half, but it was still a game worth watching into the final minutes. It really only was completely decided in the last minute or two. And, there was... When they were, when you were down to 3 or 4 minutes left, it was still, the path to victory involved the phrase, and then a miracle happened. And then this exhausted team suddenly gained new life and started getting their legs back and hitting their outside jumpers.
Because they were completely exhausted over the last 10 minutes. This season wouldn't be good. I don't think it's good enough next year, and it's certainly not good enough in year 4. But for the group of players he had, I don't think he just measures success by 25 wins, because not every team is capable of that, no matter how well they play, because they're just not that talented, and this team was just not that talented. And so I think they were better. If a team is better than expected,
that's about all you can do, because the limitations on this year's Ohio State basketball team were not caused by Chris Holtmann.
No.
Chris Holtmann got handed what he got handed, and you can only fix it so quickly. You cannot... you have a senior class, what should have been your senior class, that just completely evaporated 2 years into their careers. So if they had even a couple of those guys who were regular contributors this year, that would make a difference. Instead, he's got... you've got a transfer from Wake Forest, who's one of your biggest players. You've got a big man who is just perpetually in foul trouble. There's a lot of duct tape and baling wire. There were some, they did not have that one guy who you knew, this is the guy who can score. And
they had to play so well every night just to win, and you can't.
Right. You are not going to be able to give a 100%. 99th percentile effort every single night. That's just not how it works.
Kyle Young couldn't practice at the end of the season because his leg was falling off.
There were so many limitations this year that to get that far is remarkable. And I mean, you mentioned that this is probably not good enough next year to be considered a successful season. But a Sweet 16 berth next year, maybe an Elite 8. Like a Sweet 16 berth is a pretty good year next year. An Elite 8 is a huge success. And this year's team seemed like it kind of peaked early in some ways. Next year's team is probably going to be much more of a developmental team, where the team you see in December, because they're probably going to be relying on some of those freshmen like DJ Carton, you're not necessarily going to have them at the absolute peak of their abilities in December. That's going to be a developmental thing where they maybe come out of nowhere and are a much better team in March than they were in January. And honestly, those are the most fun kind of teams to watch, where they keep getting better. This year, it started out so promising, and then it just absolutely died in the middle of the year. And after the Illinois loss at home, I completely wrote them off for the NCAA tournament. It was just like, you just lost at home, not particularly close, to one of the worst teams in the conference. Like, they are done, and they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and squeaked in, and part of that's a real soft bubble this year, but once they got in, they beat Iowa State, which was a Big 12 championship tournament team, and gave a Houston team a pretty decent run. That's remarkable considering where they were after that Illinois game.
I agree. Last thing for me, Tom, over under 1,403 yards for J.K. Dobbins this year.
Is 1,403 what he had as a true freshman?
Yes.
Over.
Yeah, me too.
I think just based on, I think we talked about running backs last week. But
we did. I was going to talk about it today, but that was actually part of the title of the last show. So
yeah, I'll take over 1,403 because the way that Tony Alford talked about him and his focus this year and kind of renewed energy. He was a 1,000-yard back last year with splitting time, without that running threat from the quarterback, with an offensive line that's probably not as good as the offensive line is going to have this year. I think there's a pretty good chance he hits 1,500 yards this year.
I think he had like 35 more carries last year than...
Yes, he had more carries and less yards.
Yeah, and like 400 fewer yards almost. So if he gets the carries that he had last year, I think he's going to be... 1,500 I don't think is outrageous, especially if Demario McCall never gets off the training table or whatever. So that's it. That's the show for today. Thank you for the reviews, the ratings on iTunes. That is always appreciated. Tom, any announcements or pleas from you?
Not really. If you do rate us and review us on iTunes, just DM me a screenshot and we will get you a copy of The Thrilogy, the book about the 2014 National Championship by one Tony Gerdeman and John Perennis. That we are happy to send those out, and I probably have more stuff from last year on a shelf in my closet or something that I can send out. That I'll undoubtedly be cleaning out my closet at some point this spring just to tidy things up, and I'm sure I'll have lots of fun stuff to send out. I had picked up at one point last year at the Penn State game on the sideline Kirk Herbstreit's credential. He dropped it on the sideline, and I cannot for the life of me remember. I forgot to look whether I had mailed that out to someone like with the Rose Bowl program or not. But if not, I'll mail that out too. So you have you can go up to bring it to the bars. Yeah. Ladies, do you know who I am? You're not Kirk Herbstreit. Well, the credential says otherwise.
Speaking of bars, I was thinking I could send out my original Outer Rim glass mug, but I ain't giving that to nobody.
No, come on.
Not even for $5 or $10.
If you
can't buy that from me.
Yeah, you'd have to write a real good, real
at least
good.
7 stars.
Yes, seven stars, and you have your choice between the original Mona Lisa or Gerd's Outer Rim mug. Your choice.
All right. Anything else? Are we good?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next week after we talk to D-line and O-line on Friday.
That sounds
and
right.
Somebody else next week. So, hey, who knows? But check it out anyway. See ya.